Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Brad Mccannell, welcome.
Thank you.
You're in a wheelchair.
You're right.
How challenging is it for you to get around in this city where we think that we're doing a pretty good job of making access a priority?
Well, everything's relative. It's not easy because curb ramps are not standard from section to section, intersection to intersection, even from side to side half the time. I mean, the policy of the city is to put in proper curb ramps whenever they work on an intersection, but they often work on only one side of the intersection. So you have a beautiful, properly designed and built curb ramp on one side, on the other maybe none, maybe a steep one, maybe a broken one. And so you have to, before you ever cross the street, you fess it out first, and you know, look across through the traffic and see where you're going to go to.
So you have to determine whether or not you can exit the street onto the sidewalk before you even enter the intersection.
Oh yeah, you'd never just boldly go, no, you'd be trapped on the other side. And in Vancouver, maybe the worst drivers in Canada, I don't know, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying you don't want to be stuck in an intersection.
You just said that.
But at the end of the day, it's way better, it's light years better than most other places. So everything's relative.
As you're talking about that, like, I started thinking, well, what is the minimum requirement of a good ramp that you need to have? Is it width, pitch, traction, all of those things?
Yes, it's all of those things, but one of the other problems we have is the city has a lovely standard for a curb ramp, and it says it can be a 1 in 10 slope, which is steep, but it's a short run, so you can usually overcome it. But the problem is when you take a 1 in 10 slope and you stick it on a road like Oak Street or Dunsmuir, where it's already on a 10%, 20%, sometimes 30% slope, now that 1 in 10 ramp becomes more like a cliff.
Because you're already fighting gravity to get up the hill.
Yeah, and so you have what is on paper an accessible ramp, and then you stick it on a hill, so now it's tilted this much, so that becomes a much bigger challenge. So one of the things that we've actually talked to the city about is, they have blue ways and they have green ways. We want to develop an easy way, a map of how to get around the city if you're a person with a mobility impairment. What's the safest way? You want to stay the heck off Oak Street around in the Falls Creek area. It's just too steep. Mm-hmm. And so if you can't do that, what way to go? And they have, like I say, greenway maps and blueway maps and all these other maps, but there should be an easy way to get around the city, and it should be something you can just dial up on the computer and figure out.
Well, that's only one element of being able to get around the city. What are some of the other must-haves for anybody who's facing mobility challenges if you want to be able to have access to work or recreation or restaurants and all those things that we consider to be part of quality life?
The short answer is consistency. One of the problems we have is, like I said earlier, different ramps on different corners, different styles, different designs, different approaches. Even if you're doing it wrong, if you do it consistently, I can adapt to that. It's when you don't know what you're up against. So we're kind of focused on curb ramps right now, but any kind of surface, the sidewalk surface, how you get there. The other thing that doesn't happen is when there's a construction zone, there's no consideration given for people who can't. There's usually a sign, use other sidewalk. Well, it's easy for you to say. Mm-hmm. But do I got to go back a block and come around and get on the other sidewalk? And in the pouring rain or in a windy day or when I'm just tired, is that really realistic? And couldn't you put that sign at the other end of the block where I can see what's coming? So there's all these kinds of issues. But we're kind of focusing on mobility as well, and I don't want you to translate that to mean wheelchair. Wheelchair guys, we have a huge advantage, wheelchair users. Most of us have very expensive wheelchairs with very expensive seating in them. Like I'm sitting on a $2,000 cushion with a $3,000 molded back that holds me perfectly, and when I'm tired, I just stop. Mm-hmm. But my mom, my 89-year-old mother who uses a walker and can't go more than 50 feet without sitting down, my darling mother, she can't just stop. there has to be a bench, or she's got to keep going somehow. Or, you know, the other group is the older adults and seniors who should be using canes, should be using crutches, maybe even wheelchairs, but aren't because of the stigma attached to it. They're out there and they start off walking, seems fine. But all of a sudden there's a construction site, they have to go around something, or suddenly their distance is longer than they thought, and they run out of gas. Well, a wheelchair guy, you throw on the brakes and watch people go by for a few minutes. Mom's got a big problem.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting point, because I can imagine somebody would look and go, well, how many people are in wheelchairs, and really what portion of the population does this apply to? But as you point out, as we're aging, we're all going to wind up with mobility challenges, aren't we?
Yeah, everybody's going to have, we actually, as people with disabilities, we've got names for you, bipeds. We used to call you ABs, we used to call you able-bodied.
Okay.
But then the reality struck that it's not true. You're actually only temporarily able-bodied. Because it doesn't matter whether you do a face plant at Whistler when you're 17, you end up in a wheelchair like Sam Sullivan, or you're 93 and you need a walker, you're going to have a disability. The only question is when and for how long. Mm-hmm. It's really the only question. Unless you die young, and I don't recommend that.
Yeah, well, not if all you want to do is avoid having mobility issues.
Not that bad.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. But, you know, from a planning perspective, 1,000 people turn 65 every day in Canada. 1,000 people every day.
1,000 every day.
Every single day.
And they're on that long, slippery slope to...
Yeah. And in complete denial. Like I was talking about my darling mother. My 89-year-old mother, she uses a walker, can't go more than 50 feet without sitting down. She wouldn't let us put grab bars in her shower because she said, well, what if somebody sees them? They'll think I'm disabled. All right? And that begs two questions. Number one, Mom, who are you showering with? And two, really? You'd compromise your safety over the appearance of something that probably no one's ever going to see? And the answer is emphatically yes. She would not let us put them up there. And Moen, the kitchen and bathroom manufacturer guys, they saw this and they said, what we need is a really nice grab bar that looks cool, that looks more like a towel rack than a grab bar. And we'll sell 1 million of them, and they're selling 1 million of them.
Because?
They don't look like grab bars.
And because people don't want the stigma of being perceived as being...
And that's just what it is. I mean, if it was, for example, if we reversed the stigma, if it was called a sexual stabilization device, everybody would have to have one, because if you didn't have one in your bathroom, that means you're not having sex. So it's called a grab bar, it's associated with disability. If it was called a sexual stabilization device, everybody would have to have one. I've even got a name. Love handles.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, talking about the bathroom, how good are we at providing, an essential need that we all have for people with, mobility challenges?
Dismal.
Because
Dismal.
You think about it, like sitting down on the toilet, whether or not you're from standing or if you have to move over from a chair, it is quite a monumental feat. Yeah.
Most accidents happen in the home. Most home accidents happen in the bathroom. And that's partly because of design, and that's partly because of just the nature of getting older. Mm-hmm. But, we do something in construction that just drives me crazy. Typical bathroom, you got a sink, you got a toilet, and you got a tub. And they're all on the same wall because it makes it easier for the plumber.
Yes.
Okay. That means for Mom to come in and turn on the tub, she has to come into the bathroom, she puts 1 foot between the toilet and the tub, and leans way over and turns on the tub. Now, if you're going to fall, that's where you're going to fall.
You're on a slippery surface to begin with.
You're on one leg, you're 65, you're leaning over, and the solution is so... We've talked to a number of architects about this, and they said, well, we can't make the bathrooms bigger. In Vancouver, you can't afford to do that. And I say, you're absolutely right. You don't have to. If you take the tub, pick it up, rotate it 180 degrees, and set it right back down in the same space, now the controls are on an open wall. And if you go crazy, if you want to just go absolutely insane, suck the controls over 6 inches. So now I'm not even leaning over. So you can roll in, hit the shower, turn it on, fill up your tub, whatever you're doing, and you're not bending over at all. Mm-hmm. And the other advantage of bringing the controls over is now you're not turning the water on and getting wet. with cold water. You know that feeling? Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the controls are over, it's spraying down, that cold blast hits the tub instead of you.
So it's a question of design.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's a question of just of thinking about what you're actually doing. They made it easy for the plumbers to make it cheaper.
Right.
But it's not cheaper. If mom falls, if a 65-year-old mother falls and breaks her hip in the bathroom, or anywhere for that matter, but typically in the bathroom, she has a 20% chance of dying in the calendar year, and she has a 50% chance of never getting out of the institution.
Because she fell in the bathroom.
Yeah. And so why is that cheaper? There's nothing cheap about that. I think the average cost for a broken hip is $110,000, aside from the cost of her loss of independence, her life. But we're going to put an hour of a plumber's time against that?
Okay, that's the bathtub.
Yeah.
What about, by the time I get to 80, I have trouble getting up and down.
Yes.
What do I do about that? Aren't there devices, though, that will help people get on and off the toilet?
Yeah, the great thing about our system is that when people see a profit, they go and develop products that are going to sell. And there's a whole new, you may have heard of the Toto toilet, TOTO. It's an incredible product.
Mm-hmm.
It does everything for you. It washes you, it dries you, it plays you a song while it's doing it. It's a wonderful piece of equipment because it does everything for you.
Okay.
And the new generation actually have an added feature that lifts. You've seen the lift chairs for living rooms.
Yeah.
Well, it combines the lift, because the big thing about mom, I say mom because usually it's the woman that's living longer than
Well,
the
they
man.
live longer than their
But
partners.
for the older adult or senior, getting off the toilet is getting on the toilet's hard. Getting off the toilet is dangerous.
Even harder, yeah.
And so if the toilet can lift up a little bit, then they can maintain independence. And this is a critical point. So
Right, but that's an electronic device, isn't it?
it is.
Around water.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So, we do
Okay.
that all the time. We have
But where
lifts
do you
for
plug it in?
pools, and that's like there's organizations like the Safer Home Society that says when you're building a house, just put an AC outlet behind the toilet. That's all you have to do. Ground fault interrupt switch, and so you can plug something in. If something gets wet or something goes wrong, it'll just cut off. But if you do that when you're building the house, it costs like $30. If you try to do it after, it's $3,000.
Wow.
So it won't happen. It just won't happen. And
So by default, you run an extension cord.
well, yeah, now you're in
Yeah.
real trouble. Now you've got tripping hazards all over the place. This is the whole object of design right now has to be to remove the tripping hazards. You got to make these places safer. You got to, I'm back in the bathroom. All the corner sinks have these lovely little 90-degree corner that sticks out. Well, as you get older, even a slight bump against a sharp corner like that, you're going to bruise or open. Your skin gets thinner as you get older. Those kinds of problems, you can just eliminate that by cutting that onto a 45-degree angle. And you can do it. It will take a second. It's not tricky. It's not difficult.
So those are a couple of things in the home. But
Well, let me just go back one
Okay.
second, though. The importance of this is really, it's about independence. Because the moment you can't toilet yourself, then you lose your independence. The moment I have to come help mom on the toilet, it's when you're going into a home, mom.
yeah.
I'm not going to wipe. I'm just not going to do that. I love you. I love you.
Yeah.
But, and so the moment you lose independence in the bathroom, that's when you lose your independence in the home. And so by redesigning the bathroom, and it's not costing money. It's all within the same space. It's just taking off corners. It's removing tripping hazards, all those kinds of things. The whole process in the bathroom can cost, oh gosh, not even $500.
So could it be as simple as a building code change?
Oh, it could be, sure. But there's no such thing as a simple building code change.
Okay.
It's a 12-year process, typically.
Huh.
Yeah. And so the building code's forever behind the need of the actual people.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, you have to start one of the problems in Vancouver is you can sell anything. You don't have to address the market. You don't have to address the needs because everything sells just right now. That won't always be the case. And the empty nesters, when they try to sell their houses and all that stuff, they want to move into the place that they're safe in, You know, up till now they always talk about, well, you know, we can lock it and leave, and you're secure, and you don't have no maintenance, and that was been the pitch. But that's going to change when people realize what they need to be is safe in the home, what they need to be is independent in the home, and that's where the design shift will happen. But by the time the need's here now, by the time code catches up to that kind of concept, we'll be off on a whole different set of needs.
How are employers doing? You know, I know that this is a big issue for you because we all have to work, and you need to have access to your workstation and to be able to do the things that help you live.
And what work brings to you, aside from cash.
Yeah.
Cash is always good.
Yeah.
But it brings you that sense of place, that sense of worth, that you've achieved something.
Of contribution.
Contribution, and all the social stuff that comes from work. We spend more time with the people we work with than our families, for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
And so when you don't let me work because of the design of your building, because of the layout of your premises, or worse, because of the systemic barriers you put in the way. I was working with a company who told me when I went in there that they had a complete employment equity program. That's sensational, way to go. So you've got hiring forms that are in Braille, so the person can apply? Oh, no, we don't have that. Or you must have alternate formats then, so it's like big print. No, we don't have that. Well, then, of course, you have a TTY machine, so a person who's deaf could phone in and talk directly. No, don't have that. So you don't really have an employment equity program, do you? You have a policy that says you'll hire anyone, but the system won't allow it. So I cry bullshit.
But clearly they are inclined to say, well, we want to be able to meet those needs. How come we keep coming up short?
Well, it's one thing to say it, it's a big thing, another thing to do it.
Right.
It's not hard to do.
Yeah.
You just got to want to do it.
Yeah.
You got to know how to do it, and usually that involves calling someone like me.
Yeah.
But it's not hard, and it's crazy because people with disability represent the largest untapped workforce out there. We're everywhere. We're capable. I think the last number I heard was 70% of people willing and able to work are unemployed. Like, we have a heart attack if unemployment rate goes to 8% in the general population. So instead of making people with disabilities part of the economic engine, we're relegating them to be economic load, and then we get mad at them for that. We get mad because they're on welfare, or we get mad because we have to provide social housing. I've always said, people ask me all the time, what's the best way to make my business accessible? What do I do? Simple, hire a person with a disability. Just go out and hire them, take a chance. Just do it. And what'll happen automatically is your business will become accessible to that person at least, whether they're blind, whether they're low vision, whether they're people who are deaf, whether they're mobility impairments. Because what'll happen is you'll start making the place work for Brad. Not because the code said so, or not because some WorkSafe BC guy came and said something. You're going to do it. And it's not just the physical plan. It's the practice of other people. Like, one of the things if you hire a person with vision loss, you have to learn to not leave the bottom filing cabinet drawer open. You just have to learn that. And there'll be a couple of incidents, and
their
somebody
shins
will fall.
will pay the price.
Yeah, and they'll use the 7 words you can't use on television, and you'll never leave your drawer open again. And this problem solved, and you'll move on. So you're by incremental things, your place will become more and more accessible every day.
Mm-hmm. And for employers go, oh yeah, but it's going to cost me more. I'm going to have different levels of productivity. Is it worth it? What does somebody who has some kind of disability bring to the workplace that companies are missing out on if they don't have that kind of input?
Well, right out of the gate is loyalty. The system right now is it's hard to get a job as a person with a disability, and so if you get one, you're not giving it up. Mm-hmm. So you're coming in. The statistics are that there's certainly no less dedication. There's no greater absentee rate. There's no pressure. I Am Cares, which is an organization that deals a lot in employment of people with disabilities, they say the average cost to accommodate a person with a disability is around $75.
That's it?
That's it. That's
$75 bucks.
Yeah, because especially in a place like Vancouver, what's happened is the building code's picked up all the basic stuff. For the most part in new buildings, I'm going to get hit for saying this out loud,
Yeah.
but most front doors are accessible at this stage. Most sidewalks, approaches, there's usually a parking space somewhere. All that stuff comes together to get them in your door. So now the accommodations you're making are wider aisles. They're variable height desks. They're getting control. If you're working with people with cognitive or developmental issues, sometimes you want to give more control, so task lighting becomes important, and just controlling the space a little better. But none of this is tearing down walls or opening doors. It's pretty simple stuff, really. And it's not that every single thing has to be accessible to every single person. What we want you to do is ask the question, how does this impact people with disabilities? It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're building a bathroom, if you're building a new office space, if you're ordering business cards, did you ask the question, how will this affect people with disabilities? So do you need Braille on your cards? If you're the president of a major corporation, you probably do. If you're head of an HR department, you do. But if you're running the baggage handling belts at YVR, maybe not.
So what is the Rick Hansen Institute or Foundation doing that can help people who start to ask those questions? How do you help us get to that point where we can make informed decisions to create access?
Step one is to identify the issues. You got to get an inventory of what's wrong. And so we've initiated the Rick Hansen certification program, where it's similar to LEEDS, familiar with LEEDS, but it's a sustainability program, and they give you gold, bronze, silver, platinum kind of ratings on properties. We've developed a program just like that, not just like that, but similar to that, and that we will certify properties at the level of access that they have. The idea is to use that as an incentive to create more and more access. What happens currently is developers come along and they design a building and they start pouring concrete, and then they phone me and say, hey, how can we make this accessible?
But you're there as a resource.
As a resource, I'm trying my best.
Thank you very much. Thanks for doing this.